All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. And so just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Woo, I'm inspired. What about you, bro? You inspired?
He is a great speaker.
Right.
Probably, like you said earlier, probably one of the best America has produced.
Right.
And given the state of American education today, probably the best America ever will produce.
Oh, I hope not.
I mean, it is what it is. When I was in college getting my undergrad working, I was 40.
Right.
And I'm sitting there surrounded by all these 19 and 20-some-year-old kids who were struggling with English 101.
Wow.
I'm like, you all just graduated from high school.
Wow.
It's been 40 years since I took this stuff. What do you mean?
Wow.
You can't communicate well if you don't know how the language works. And
right.
He was part of a generation where they knew how the language worked. I mean,
right.
You look at Dr. King, you look at C.S. Lewis, the World War II and post-war generation, they understood how language worked.
Right.
And politicians of that era did as well. You look at John F. Kennedy's inauguration speech. You look at Malcolm X's speeches again, and he's not even a guy that went to college.
No, he's in prison.
Right. And you compare that with what passes for communications today. Our esteemed great leader.
Text and tweets. Right. Well, look, as I said earlier, I think Martin Luther King's the greatest American this country ever produced. And a big part of that was because he was able to understand better than just about anybody the intersection between class and race in this country. When I look at his work that he did with LBJ, things like the Poor People Campaign, his support of organized labor. A lot of people don't know that when Martin Luther King died, all the labor unions memorialized him as somebody who had died in the service of labor rights, because when he was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee, he was there to march with sanitation workers.
That's correct.
And from that, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, the things he worked with LBJ about, the fact that he was able to, unlike modern leaders, he was able to stay flexible. A lot of people don't know that in the 50s, he worked with Richard Nixon and Eisenhower on the civil rights stuff in the 50s, the civil rights bills in the 50s. He was a big part of who they consulted. And then once the Kennedy brothers came to prominence and Richard Nixon turned into a overt white supremacist in his political tactics, in a lot of ways, purposely demonizing Dr. King and a lot of civil rights leaders. He worked with the Kennedy brothers and LBJ. Now, the funny thing about his work with LBJ is that LBJ, there's a lot of accounts of LBJ and audio of LBJ saying horrible things. Things like, I'm going to have niggers voting Democrat for 200 years after he signed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, stuff like that. But King was smart enough to know, and this is what I tried to convey for the whole 4 years of Donald Trump being president. Okay, there's a lot of horrible people in the world. The world can be a horrible place full of horrible people. You're going to have to deal with some of them. Okay, and LBJ had a terrible civil rights record in Texas when he was the president. But King still dealt with him. He said, look, this guy's the president. We got to deal with him. If we want a Civil Rights Act, if we want to, this is the guy we got to push into the Civil Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act. This is the guy we have to push into the Voting Rights Act, and to take poverty serious in America. And so for me, I will always look at him as the greatest class warrior. He'll always be the I have a dream guy to in the mainstream, because that's the best way that they can defang him and just make him out to be the guy who wanted everybody to get along. But he was a guy who understood the reality of poverty and understood the reality of racism and class warfare, and why it was important to support laborers, and why it's important to support working class people in order to have a functioning society. One of the last people who really got it on that level. There's a lot of race hustlers around these days. And then there's a lot of people who, just say, oh, that's racist or this racist or whatever. He understood the value of racism in the class war, between elites and working class people. So what will you remember Dr. King for, Rev?
Again, being a great speaker, a wordsmith, and also someone who tried to navigate what was a treacherous terrain. I mean,
yes,
you got Black America coming out of the 50s, coming out the World War II generation, which, made famous by the Tuskegee Airmen, who were basically operating in the realm of what we now call respectability politics. If we can just show them that we value what they value, maybe they will recognize our common shared humanity. And in the midst of the 60s, the rise of Black Power, saying that, look, they're not going to just grant to us what should be self-evident. We're going to have to take it from them.
Right.
We're going to have to force them to treat us as people who share this nation with them. And he had to navigate that. And I'm sure it wasn't easy.
No.
At the same time, I know some people want to judge him based on today's standards.
Oh, yeah.
And, he didn't have the luxuries that we have today.
He did not.
To disagree with the powers that be in his day could get you killed. Today, okay, it may get you canceled.
Right.
But your heart still beats after you get canceled.
It
Your
does.
your lungs still work. You can get up the next day and hug your kids. Well, like those people that did the bus protests. Some folk that got involved in those events did not get up the next morning. Dr. King's house was firebombed. And there were others who like Dr. King, were targeted for assassination.
Mm.
So it was there. There's nothing going on today that's comparable.
Oh no, not at all.
He put it on the line. You know, when he says in that one message that you played, he's not worried about leaving an inheritance for his children in terms of finances.
Mm.
Well, you know, under most circumstances, one would say, well, you know, it is kind of your responsibility as a parent to leave something for your children.
Right.
But he had, in a sense, he and his wife, Coretta, had given up what you would think of as the normal American dream.
Absolutely.
You know, the house, the picket fence, 3-bedroom house, 2 cars in the garage, and a dog. They gave up all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, if he couldn't leave a better America for his children, then he gave up all of that for nothing.
Right. I agree. The level of sacrifice that he made just to try to make our society better, like he said, so that his kids could inherit a much better America. A lot of people don't know that he was broke pretty much his entire career. Like people like Harry Belafonte had to pay his bills for him and contribute to him paying his bills because he could not. He couldn't pay his bills. He was stabbed at one point. People threw bricks at him when he was in Chicago. One of the worst places he was treated was up here in the north, right across the border from where we are in the great state of Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
Right there in Chicago, Richard J. Daley, the father. I think the father's Richard J. Daley, and he had. You know, he wanted to assassinate Dr. King. There's a lot of evidence that he wanted to assassinate him the same way they ended up assassinating Fred Hampton a few years after that.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to kill him in Chicago. He was confronted and assaulted and brutalized and beaten in Chicago by those people. So it's not just the South. It's very easy to demonize the South in this country. Say even with this Trump thing that all these rednecks and hicks and stuff. It has never just been the South. There's always been a lot of racists up north here in Indiana. A lot of people I know grew up here in Indiana say that black people couldn't even go to the beach in Miller, where I grew up at. Basically, I grew up a few blocks from the beach for pretty much my whole life, and a lot of black people couldn't even deliver mail. Or couldn't even go swimming at the beach during the 50s and 60s, I've heard. And so that was just the reality in America, period. And he sacrificed everything. He gave his life to so that his kids and your kids and whenever I have kids and everybody else's kids could inherit a place where they could achieve and inspire the next generation after them. And so, you know, it's always important. I try not to fall into the Martin Luther King Day trap because it always annoys me to see so many people cynically use Dr. King's name. So many corporations use his name to sell products or you know, or whatever, or to try to perpetuate this idea that they are somehow virtuous when they don't like the Martin Luther Kings of the day, or at least the people inspired by Martin Luther King today, the people talking about police brutality and other forms of racism here in this country. So you know, it's been a great show, and definitely we had to shine a light on Dr. King. So you got any last words, Rev?
Well, have a great weekend, everybody. We'll be back next week, of course, next Friday, 6:00.
Yes.
And I think we'll get a chance to take a look at this Purdue Polytech High School.
We have to.
What is it possibly at stake? How does it connect with the recent referendum of $71 million for the Gary Community School Corporation? Is it a competitor to the Gary School Corporation, or is it a partner?
Right. Okay, folks. And, you know, we're going to let Dr. King take us out, but Before that, you can chop it up with me on Twitter at The Chemist Lives. The Chemist is spelled with a K, as I'm a product of the Gary Community School System. We can talk about politics, music, sports. You can tell me how terrible I am at this, or you can just listen to me and Rev every Friday here, 6 to 8 Central Standard Time. So for station owner Marion Williams, station manager Natalie Ammons, and Reverend Delwyn Campbell, I am Scott Cannon, and this was Issues and Answers on WOTH 1370 AM. God bless the working class. God bless labor. And
God bless you.
Yes, we're going to let Dr. King take us out of here with my favorite speech. We're coming for our check. We're coming to get our check. This has always been great to me.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. Now, this is what we are faced with, and this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.